This is the ultimate crime-fighting champion, Hurricane Helms, and you're listening to IYH Wrestling. And if you're not, what's up with that?
All right, we're back. Welcome to In Your Head Wrestling Radio. I'm the internet icon, handsome Jackie Jones. Lost my right-hand man. Ooh, yeah, I'm 1-inch biceps, a power goat. Ah, how about that? Yeah.
Oh.
See, I'm not scared when a guest is on the line. I'll do the bah. It's the power tonight. Joining us right off the bat. He's probably wondering why after that. I don't know. But we have the return of Matt Hardy with us. How are you doing?
Good, very much. How are you guys doing? I'm very intrigued by the two names you have. One is Jack and one is 1-inch bicep. Big fan of that name.
Thank you, sir. It's a shoot name. I mean, if you see the man, you would understand why.
There you have it.
Yeah. Actually, it's more like if you'd call like a really tall guy Shorty, because he's just jacked.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Well, let everybody know next week and next Saturday, November 17th, in Monica, Pennsylvania, on iPay-per-view. So you don't even have to be there. But if you can make it there, go to the event live. But on iPay-per-view, WWNlive.com. Links right on our website. And it's only starting at like $10. You can see Matt Hardy versus Shane Douglas in a pretty awesome card for Extreme Rising.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be a part of this. Shane is right on the verge of actually being fully retired from wrestling, and considering he's kind of coming out of a hiatus to actually take this match, and you're going to have for the first time ever Matt Hardy versus Shane Douglas, and let's be honest, probably the only time ever in Pittsburgh, his hometown, which was a huge stop for the Extreme brand of wrestling for so long. So this is going to be a very special occasion. Not only are all the old throwbacks going to be there, I mean, I think in a lot of people's estimation, you're going to have a dream match of Matt Hardy versus Shane Douglas, something that a lot of people thought would never happen.
Yeah. Is there any particular reason why he's because he said he was gonna retire from in-ring wrestling, and now he's coming back to wrestle you?
I think it's one of those things. People. It's been a while since I've been out and a freelance wrestler or an independent wrestler, and I think there's a lot of people out there that still go, okay, well, I want to test this Matt Hardy. I want to see how good he still is, or how good he's become, or what the deal may have been. And in some ways, I think Shane just kind of wants to step into the ring. I'm a new opponent. He's never wrestled before. He's never wrestled anyone with my particular style. So for him, it's kind of like not only a testing procedure for him, but also a testing procedure for me to see how good I actually am right now. So it's going to be an interesting dichotomy between us for sure.
Yeah. Now, on your first Extreme Rising show, were you unsure how these fans would react to you?
No, I was pretty sure, and I think I pretty much had it to a T. I'm pretty good at being on the pulse of how wrestling fans are going to be, and I knew it was going to be a very mixed bag because wherever I go, there's going to be diehard Matt Hardy / Hardy Boys fans, which are younger kids or people that followed us throughout our WWE career. They're going to be there and they're going to be supportive regardless of whatever. But then the diehard ECW and Extreme niche fans. Because I'm not an Extreme original or an ECW original, I knew those people, it was going to be an uphill battle. And, it's one of those things, in time, only you earn their respect, especially when you walk into their promotion and on your debut match, you're in the main event against Jerry Lynn, who's one of the ECW icons. So I knew it was going to be a mixed bag for sure. And, the people that were diehard Extreme wrestling fans, they gave me a hard time, which is great. And then, my fans were there cheering. So it's okay. As long as I'm invoking emotion from people, it's fine. I'll channel it in the appropriate way in the ring. But as long as they're entertained and I'm invoking emotion, I'm good.
Silence is a bad sign.
Yes.
Yeah. Did you ever think of playing up like that you were the WWE CW champion and trying to get the crowd really to hate you?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't even think it's a thing of really playing it up. I mean, I am.
Right.
And that was one of the promotional points going into this match with Jerry Lynn. I mean, obviously I was an ECW champion from a different brand, from a different company, from a different era, but it is. Still, when you look back in the history books, there's a representation of me as being an ECW champion. So I'm facing Shane Douglas, who's probably the most well-known ECW champion history of the original ECW. So once again, that's another, small factoid that actually adds a lot of intrigue to the match, I think.
Mm-hmm. Now, if you didn't get the shot in WWF when you guys were starting out, when you guys were younger, would you have gone to ECW, you think? Would that have been something you guys wanted to do?
Yeah, we were actually in talks with a couple of the people from ECW, and we actually went up and did a tryout for a couple smaller shows underneath Sandman, with Sandman and Bill Alfonso, right before we signed with WWE. So if we hadn't signed with WWE at that time, we probably would have landed in ECW.
Yeah. No, I mean, a lot of stuff you guys did, especially like in the TLC matches and with Edge and Christian and the Dudley Boys, was a lot of that kind of stuff like kind of started in ECW, then you guys took it to, you know, to the big stage. Were you guys like aware of that, like the stuff that was going on in ECW, and wanted to do that on a bigger stage? Or?
Yeah, you know, I'll be honest with you. I was aware of the things that ECW was doing at that time. You know, I'm a diehard wrestling fan. I will be to the day I die. I still keep up with the product as much as I can now. And, you know, back then I saw that ECW, they actually got the ball rolling with what became the whole Attitude Era. I mean, I don't think anyone can really deny that Vince looked at ECW and said, hey, they got some really cool stuff going on here. And whoever the powers that were being at that time, whoever his most influential guys were, kind of, you know, convinced him to go with it as well. And it certainly worked, you know, because they were doing things that weren't just a standard wrestling match. They were putting people through tables, and they were having ladders and table matches, and they were fighting all over the building, and they had larger-than-life, more adult-oriented characters. And that stuff really caught on, you know, and I think Attitude just took it to a much bigger level and executed it as good as you possibly could on that level. Yeah. But watching ECW, I remember like a guy like Sabu, for instance, was very influential to myself and Jeff, especially when we saw the moves he was doing. We saw him putting people through tables. We were like, wow, this really adds a whole nother layer on, you know, professional wrestling. Rey Mysterio, when we first saw him there were a lot of things that he did, you know, especially the Psychosis and Juventud Guerrero that myself and Jeff were influenced by. But I have to say, when we first started doing the ladder match, our original inspirations for it was the first ever Shawn Michaels Razor Ramon ladder match. Yeah. Because we saw that, and that blew us away, you know. And then we actually used to do that. Jeff and I would wrestle one another on a lot of independent shows where I would be Matt Hardy, High Voltage or Surge, and he would be Jeff Hardy underneath a mask as Will of the Wisp. And we wrestled ladder matches all up and down the East Coast. And we wanted to, you know, put that on a bigger level, and Edge and Christian were the two guys to do it with. And once we had that first ever ladder match at No Mercy 99, from there it just continued. It was the snowball continued until it became a full-fledged avalanche. You know, it was there, and then the tables match with the Dudleys, who obviously from ECW, and the TLC matches. And then once we started doing these things, it felt like they were never going to let us stop doing them, you know what I mean, because people liked them so much.
Yeah. Now, you were there at the time. The Dudley Boys definitely made it really huge coming from ECW, but a lot of the guys that maybe weren't, like Cactus Jack was, you know, big in WCW beforehand, but were there people that didn't want some of the ECW guys to succeed when they would come over to WWF?
I think so. I mean, I know when Public Enemy first got there, they asked Public Enemy, you know, not to break tables or, you know, to wrestle. And then the thing that, let me even back this up. The thing that made ECW so good, Paul Heyman was such a genius booker / promoter because he highlighted everyone's strengths. I mean, he would take whatever the best qualities were about someone, and he would keep pushing that, and get everything they could out of it. And that's what gets characters over. That's what, like I said earlier, that's what gets characters or wrestlers to connect with the crowd emotionally. Public Enemy, they had their deal. They were, you know, hip-hop gangsters. They did, you know, the hand motion with nah, you know, and they would put people through tables. And they ended up being a huge act. When they came to WWE and were forced to wrestle a couple of matches, I remember there were some guys that didn't like them. They ultimately had a match with the Acolytes, which was very, very ugly. And Taz was another guy who was over huge in ECW. Once he came to WWE, you can see that never translated. And once again, they took away from playing to his strengths and what his character was built around. And the examples keep, you know, popping up over and over. If you look at Paul Heyman's ECW originally, you know, Sandman, he came out and he would drink beer and he would cane people, and he was over like crazy, and people bought tickets to see him. 911 was another example of a guy who was very limited as far as being a complete wrestler overall, but he became a huge star then. He was really over. So I give them credit on that front. So there were some times when people came to WWE, and I think at WWE sometimes they expect people to be a more well-rounded performer, 360 degrees, and be able to do everything. And my thought is, if it's business and you're trying to make money, you want your acts to be as over as they possibly can be. And if that means, like, you know, protecting them in some areas that they're weak at, then why not do it? Because it's your investment in the first place. But that's not always how WWE and crew thinks.
Yeah. You brought up being, like, emotionally attached to the guys. And, yeah, I graduated in 94, and, like, I was probably, like, I don't think any other wrestling company I was, like, that attached to, like, emotionally is ECW. And you think that's something that a company like Extreme Rising should take today, not necessarily just the extreme stuff where guys are going through tables and hardcore matches, but try to get that where the fans themselves are really emotionally attached to the actual company and the wrestlers, because I think that's something that's kind of missing on a lot of the wrestling on TV today.
Absolutely. I think that's hugely missing. I think you have the thing where, WWE, for instance, is a major, is a major global company. It's publicly traded, and they're at the point where they've, said, okay, we're not trying to be any kind of cult favorites. We're just trying to get as big a sponsors as possible. And I don't think they cater to the fans. I mean, they try and do things that are going to make the fans happy, but they don't overly cater to the fans like the old ECW audience did, or even like they did during the Attitude. Like, I think the whole point of Mick Foley becoming the world champion was like the people wanted it. They knew he worked hard, and it was like an emotional connection where they really wanted. I want this guy to succeed. He was never meant to be the world champion, but we want him to be the world champion, and they followed through with it. And I think a lot of that has been lost in WWE, especially after they became a public company. And you just had Linda running for Senate, who we found out she lost today. And that's been an issue too. They know they've been scrutinized because of all the wrestling and the stigma with wrestling, which is sometimes spurned out of people being overworked or, beating their bodies up and just getting into bad positions, bad places in life. They tried to, get away from that stigma. So with that same thing being said, there's still a big mechanism that's going to go ahead no matter what. So the fans, they're not there to cater to the fans, first and foremost. They're there to make money, and they want to make the fans happy, but the fans aren't catered to like an ECW would have been back in the day.
Yeah.
And I think someone who's an upstart organization like Extreme Wrestling, it should really have a grassroots movement. And I think whatever their fans want, they should try and give them that as much as possible.
Like, can you have a wrestling company and have it totally sanitized? Like, I think there has to be some part of some part of wrestling has to be some violence to it. Has to go to some level, like kind of a lowest common denominator. Do you agree with that?
As far as like the stigma wrestling has, professional wrestling is.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you try to totally sanitize it and have and get away from all the violence and anything that people might look down on, I don't think you really have a wrestling company anymore. I think you have to have some of that.
I agree. You can turn this into a quote right now. Professional wrestling is a black sheep, and it should remain a black sheep. I mean, we're not 100% sports. We're not 100% entertainment. We're in a league of its own. And it needs to stay that way. Don't be ashamed of the black sheep that professional wrestling is. As opposed to being ashamed to it, embrace it. That's my motto.
Yeah. I always thought the beginning of the documentary, Beyond the Mat always explained it perfectly what it's like to be a wrestling fan. I have to remember that. He's pretty much explaining what wrestling is, and it's nothing else but wrestling.
Right.
It's its own thing.
There's nothing else in the world like wrestling. You can't compare anything to it like, WWE so badly wants to be like a mainstream entertainment company, and be compared to.
Mm-hmm. Go on, sorry.
They want to be compared to, a production company or, Universal or Paramount or whoever, like in the movie business or in the television show business, but it's not, and it never will be, because there's nothing else like professional wrestling in this entire world. And because of some of the carniness that professional wrestling has evolved from, it's always going to have that stigma on it. It's always going to be a bit of a black sheep. But once again, I say don't try and, bury that or don't try and cover it up or don't avoid it. Embrace it for what it's worth and try and do all you can to make your company as good as possible. It's going to be different. It's never going to be looked upon as like a legitimate entertainment or a legitimate sport. It's legitimate pro wrestling, and that's what it is.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask you something about Scott Steiner's lawsuit against TNA and your brother, if you had any thoughts on that.
I like Scott Steiner, but that accusation he threw out to Jeff was absurd because since the Victory Road incident, Jeff is the most responsible human being I know, and he hasn't done anything wrong, and he absolutely goes out of his way in all scenarios to make sure there's never a bad interpretation of him. He's like the perfect human being now, and it's pretty amazing because for years he's been the enigma, and he was always like a question mark or a guess. You never knew, what Jeff you were going to get that was going to show up that day, but now he is like the most responsible human being alive. So to me, the only thing I can think of is because Jeff's incident was known and it was public information that Scott thought he could use that to maybe get them to drop their suit. I don't know, but the accusation is outrageous.
Mm-hmm. As a wrestler, even if things happen in the ring, is it kind of like an unwritten thing that you wouldn't sue somebody anyway, even if you did get hurt in the ring?
I wouldn't. I don't think in that mindset. I have no idea what mindset other people are in, but it's one of those things, too, like, obviously, all I can say, I don't think Scott could have been hurt that bad because he's wrestled several times since then. It's not like it's not like he that was his last match, and he's been retired ever since then. It's just, I don't know. To me, like I said before, I like Scott. I've worked with Scott recently, actually, like in some independent shows here in the Mid-Atlantic area, but just the claim seems outrageous.
Yeah. Now, you talked about, WWF not really giving the fans what they want. Do you think TNA does?
Say that again, please.
You talked earlier about the WWF not necessarily giving the fans what they want to see right now. Do you agree with that with TNA as well?
I think TNA still tries to do it more. TNA is more of a grassroots company, I would say, as opposed to like trying to be there for each individual, as opposed to thinking, globally in the big scheme of things. I know TNA is very fan friendly in their live events. Sometimes a little too much, I think, because I think you want to protect the value of each of your talents, and if they're all so accessible always, then I think it takes away from it a little bit, it detracts from their value. I think TNA is more suited in that way as far as catering to the fans as opposed to WWE is. But still, like, sometimes TNA now, to me, from the people that are in charge and the kind of direction they're going in, they're in more of a direction of trying to pursue a WWE type of entertainment type of company, in my opinion, from what I've seen and what I've heard. Because even if you look back at TNA during the day when the X Division was a huge deal, I mean, it was always highlighted so much. I think about when, I want to say it was Samoa Joe, Christopher Daniels, and AJ. I remember there was a real epic three-way match, and that match was always highlighted. And still, the X Division's around, but it's not highlighted quite as much, just because that's something that people love. Like the diehard wrestling fans are huge into like matches that are great matches, that are 4-star matches, 4.5-star matches, whatever it may be. And that's one of the things, WWE, they're not worried about the matches or the match quality on the TV program. They're worried about their storyline that is trying to be driven to a total casual audience and trying to hook viewers in an emotional way. But if you look at a company that really wants to, like, grab the diehard wrestling fan and cater to them, you'll always have good wrestling on the show. That'll be the first thing that's talked about as opposed to the storyline or the character or the angle.
Mm-hmm. Now, in Extreme Rising, when ECW first took off, like we were saying, kind of wrestling was at a lull. And do you think this is a perfect time for another company to come about and get some of the fans that might not be happy with the wrestling they see on TV?
I mean, I think it is. I always think in wrestling, especially if it's on a down cycle, it's always a good time for another company to be around. And not only just because I think it's good for business, I think it's good for all the boys that are working, because now that I've been able to go around the last few months and work a bunch of different independents, there's a lot of really talented guys out there that aren't working somewhere. This should be, that deserve to and have the talent to. So, yeah, if Ring of Honor would continue to grow and if an Extreme Rising would take off, and last weekend in Nashville, I just taped the first television taping for Crossfire, which is going to be going national with a deal with DirecTV before too long. There's a lot of places out there that have a lot of potential. And I think we need all these places that we can to rise up. And almost I feel like there's a little sense of the old territories coming back, where you might not have these places that are going to wrestle, work a schedule like WWE or have the global recognition of a WWE, but there's going to be a lot more companies out there that do really well, like in regional areas where guys can go and make livings at.
Mm. Do you think the iPay-per-view concept helps a lot of the smaller companies?
Well, I mean, obviously it helps in the way if there's someone in Tampa, Florida, that wants to see the Extreme Rising show in Pittsburgh, but it's impossible for them to get there. They can see it. So, yeah, I mean, anytime there's new ways for people to put their eyeballs on your product, it's always a plus. So with Extreme Rising, it opens up a lot of capabilities. I can say I'm unsure of, like, the cost of these things and how much it would be beneficial as far as making a profit. I don't know. But as far as being fan accessible, I think it's a great thing, because it allows people, across not only the United States, but the world, in theory, to see the pay-per-view. So that's always a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Inchman, did you have a question?
Yeah, I had a question from the message board. Luddite Supreme, he wants to know, how do you feel about working in front of the ROH fans as a heel?
I enjoy it. Like I said, you can't put me in an uncomfortable situation. Like, I very much take pride in the truth of my own reality. And at this point in my life, I know who I am better than I ever have. I know my strengths, I know my weaknesses. And if I go in front of the crowd and if I can perform in a way that they react to it, whether they're cheering me or booing me, it's all good with me, because once I'm out there, I am Matt Hardy, through the curtain, red lights on, I'm in the mode, and I'm just there to entertain people, and I'm there to draw from their emotions. So I actually enjoy it because it's a fun gig, because I really still don't have to act like some terrible bad guy. I just get to be me. I'm the WWE guy, Matt Hardy, that's an outsider that doesn't wrestle a Ring of Honor style, supposedly, and I get to go out there and be me, and I don't have to be fake to get booed, which is very enjoyable.
Mm-hmm. Now, November was historically a big month for Extreme Wrestling. So this month you're wrestling Shane Douglas. What are your thoughts on this match? Are you looking forward to this match?
Yeah, I am. I'm looking forward to the match. I am also looking at it, in all honesty, as a challenge. Mm-hmm. Shane is, as he's admitted, himself, that he's getting towards the end of his career, and he's pretty much ready to step out of the ring and, step into a backstage role. Actually, just worked with Shane at Crossfire in Nashville last weekend. He's one of the kind of one of the guys in charge there, as far as like one of the producers and agents that put things together. Mm-hmm. But to me, it's a challenge to see how good I can make this match, because I know Shane is going to be very hungry, especially in his hometown, to prove people wrong and do the best he can. So with me, I'm going to have all those same qualities, but I really want people to leave saying, oh my God, that Matt Hardy-Shane Douglas match blew me out of the water. Not only did I not think, Matt Hardy and Shane Douglas were going to be able to entertain me like that, it just way surpassed my expectations. And that's my goal. I look at it as a challenge, and I think it's something very feasible, because I know we're both hungry and excited to do it. Yeah.
I would say, do you have more motivation right now to prove like that, you're still a great performer? After a lot of things in the last couple of years. Yeah, I do. And one thing that I have that works in my advantage now is just that my physical health, because from 2008, 2009, 2010, I just had such a string of injuries. I've had 7 surgeries throughout my career. 5 of them happened in that time period, and just my body was so beat up, and it was just hard. I could never recuperate. I could never get healthy. And that just made me crazy. It just sent me into a dark place altogether. But the thing is now that I have, I wrestle on a Friday or Saturday, possibly Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and I have 4 days to train and get healthy and let my body recuperate, as opposed to being gone Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, travel all Wednesday, home Thursday, gone again, where your body never catches up. So that's helped me, and I need it, especially as I am getting older. I need that time to recuperate. So it's really made me motivated, and this tour I've been doing of, all these great independent shows, like Extreme Rising and the Crossfire, Ring of Honor, wherever it may be, has really rekindled my passion for this business. I remember why I fell in love with this business in the first place, and that's a very nice feeling to have. Mm-hmm. It's real quick, too. There's a lot of people that talk about a youth movement in wrestling, and do you think you can ever grow as a wrestler if you only work with guys like at your same level? Do you have to work with people that have been in the business longer to become a better wrestler?
Yeah, I mean, you have to work with people better than you to get better. I mean, when Jeff and I went to WWE in the first place, we were both extremely talented, we were both extremely athletic, but until we started working with people better than us, and I'll tell you when we really turned the corners, when we were put with Michael Hayes. When we were put with Michael Hayes, he started giving us insight into matches and what, allows the people to truly get emotionally connected with a performer, and that's where we turn the page. And then when you get to work with guys like Undertaker, Stone Cold, the Triple H's, I mean, those guys, were so good at that point. That's where information, you can't help but to learn stuff, because information just rubs off on you from working with those guys. So, yeah, guys need to work with guys better than them, no ifs, ands, buts about it, because wrestling at its core is storytelling. And if you can be a great athlete and do that as well and tell a great story that gets people emotionally connected, that's great. You can see throughout the course of time, there's been a lot of guys who've been, okay athletes, but they've been such good at telling stories that they've been over huge. You even look at somebody like Stone Cold. He was a hell of an athlete. He was a hell of a wrestler as far as that goes, but he was very limited. He didn't do 1.5. He didn't do moonsaults. He always went out there and he told a great story, whatever it may be. And he always emotionally drew the fans in. That's how he became the most over guy in the history of wrestling. Hulk Hogan, another guy. I mean, obviously these guys had pushes. They had the machine behind them the whole while. But once again, at its basic core, wrestling is storytelling. And the first thing you said, should there be a youth movement in wrestling? I mean, you're always going to have younger guys come in that do exciting things and innovate things in the business and can do things that older athletes can't do just because they have the they have the power of youth on their side. But in theory, I think wrestling, what it always needs constantly isn't a youth movement. It just needs a talent movement. The guys who are most talented, and if it's because they're better athletes and they can perform better, go with those guys. If it's because the guy's just a superior storyteller, then go with that guy. It's not about youth. It's about talent.
Yeah, that's pretty much what RVD said when we had him on. Let's see. You mind if we take a couple quick calls?
Yeah, how do you know when you're in love?
914 area code. Who are you? All right. The Jericho guy. Do you have a question?
Yes, I do.
What's going on?
I wanted to ask you, Matt, this is probably a question you actually probably don't get often, but back during your Matitude era, when you were doing that angle, when they put you in that program with Zach Gowen, did you already have your reservations that they were starting to kill that angle, that gimmick?
Yeah, I actually had my reservations about what they were going to do with me. Once the crowd actually ended up being so entertained by that gimmick, you know, the whole version 1 thing wasn't like a real hardcore hated heel. It was more of like a delusional character. So once it kind of crossed the line and became entertaining, and I was getting cheered a lot, you know, throughout, you know, the country or the world, wherever it may be, wherever we're working house shows, and I said, oh, this is kind of starting to get over. It might be the time to kind of, you know, merge into being a babyface character. And also at that same point, there was a situation where I was going to go back to Raw. And I think between them not really wanting to turn me babyface and trying to, like, force my hand to keep me heel because the gimmick got over, and then also because I was going back to Raw, I think it was almost like a little, okay, well, we're going to give you what you want, but we're going to punish you on the way a little bit in some ways. And it was okay. You know, looking back, I think then I was maybe frustrated with it, but I mean, looking back now, like, I'm glad I got a chance to wrestle Zach, just because, especially on that level, it was such a unique experience. And now I look at things more of not a winning and losing situation. I look at things of like, what is this situation and how can I make it special, and is it something that will be memorable to people? Because a lot of times now, man, people get it. Information's so accessible about professional wrestling. They're not always focused on the wins and losses. They're focused about the memorable moments.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Because I remember I was one of those ones cheering for you at live events during the Matitude. Wow. It was more, you know, that's how I looked at it too. You know, you should have a little bit more face because, you know, they were trying to push you as a heel, but, you know, you just kept getting face reactions.
Yeah, and you know, I'll be honest, the thing that did for my career more than anything else, and what I learned about that period of time, is that, you know, Jeff and I were both pushed and promoted as the Hardy Boys, which was two, you know, adrenaline-driven daredevils. And what I learned is, like, that was more Jeff than me. So once I switched and I became version 1, the cocky, a little bit of a smug guy with a smirk who actually, you know, was a little full of himself, a little delusional, but also was going to bust his ass to make sure the job happened. That's when I started developing my own character, and I really got in touch with who I was as a performer. Yes.
Go on, sorry.
And then as opposed to being like, you know, one half of the Hardy Boys, the guys who were the masters of ladder matches. And then once I did turn, you know, once I became a good guy and came back with the edge thing, and, you know, my whole motto was Matt Hardy will not die. I mean, that's really when I got my fingers on the pulse of who I am as a performer and as a character.
All right. Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for calling in, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Let everybody know again, next Saturday, iPay-per-view, Extreme Rising. You go to extremerising.com or wwnlive.com. We get the link right on the website, and it's starting at only $10. Shane Douglas versus Matt Hardy. There's a lot of good matches on the card. I'm looking forward to it. I've seen all the Extreme Rising, Extreme Reunion shows, and I think they've gotten better each time.
You know, I wasn't at the first one, obviously, and I'd heard about it. And I'm glad they had another show, and I know there was a little bit of an effort there to try and, you know, convince those fans to have confidence in their product again. And I'm glad they did follow through and they did do it. And I thought they put on two hell of a show. I thought both shows in Queens, New York, and Philadelphia at the end of June were both tremendous events. And like you said, I think since that point when they came back into that second show, I think they've only got better.
Mm-hmm. I actually enjoyed the first one. It wasn't perfect or anything, but you heard a lot of negative about it, but that probably had my expectations low, but I still enjoyed the show. But the second and third one were a lot better.
Right. Well, very good. And that's one of those things too, man. It's there's so much pressure on any group or even any show to perform to a certain extent, and it's hard to live up to what a lot of wrestling fans want now. And I think you have to find a happy medium in there, because recently I did an interview where someone had asked me about, do I think wrestling fans are too demanding? Well, in some cases they are, because they have been gifted with so much stuff, especially over the last 20 years. You know, the wrestling has been so amazing. You know, and I think as a creative team or as a wrestling company, where you have to really win the people over is just by being creative in different ways. You know, because every move that has been done has probably been done, and you can probably, you know, come up with a little something new here and there, but it's just going about your matches or your setups or your angles or your characters a little bit different. And you can't insult I think a big thing nowadays is you can't insult the wrestling fans' intelligence, because, like I said, all information is so accessible. I mean, when you go out and you give them some hokey wrestling stuff, you know, from 50 years ago, they're not going to buy it. They're going to hate it, and they're going to flip the channel or cut off the pay-per-view, because you can't insult wrestling fans like that. They're way too educated right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, we want to thank you for coming on.
You got it. I want to thank you guys for having me, and I'm very excited for this Extreme Rising show. I think it's going to be a hell of an event from top to bottom, and I am going to do everything in my power to make sure Matt Hardy and Shane Douglas is the most memorable match on that card, and I'm sure Shane's going to do his as well.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, honestly. So, thanks again. Hopefully we'll talk to you again sometime.
All right, yeah, and you guys, everyone out there listening, make sure to check out my website, which is MattHardyBrand.com, and I'll be updating and giving information out about the pay-per-view as we go on this next week. There's going to be a series of promos actually going up for Extreme Rising, so make sure to check out that. And you can check me out at Twitter, twitter.com/MattHardyBrand, and YouTube.com/MattHardyBrand as well.
You know what? I had those all written down, but he's much more professional than me. He remembered to say them.
No problem. Well, and just in case, last but not least, as Rebby Scott's yelling in the background, make sure to go to the store, which is shopmatthardy.com. There's actually going to be some stuff from one of the prior Extreme Rising events going up, some ring-worn merchandise you can get, and all your Matt Hardy Boy needs are there.
Excellent. Thanks.